a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Ernest II, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Ernest II was the sovereign Duke of the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, reigning from 1844 to his death. Ernest was born in Coburg as the elder child of Ernest I, Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, and his wife, Princess Louise of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg. 14 months later, his younger brother, Prince Albert, was born, who became consort of Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Ernest's father became Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in 1826 through an exchange of territories. In 1842, Ernest married Princess Alexandrine of Baden in what was to be a childless marriage. Soon after, he succeeded as Duke upon the death of his father on the 29th of January 1844. As reigning Duke Ernest II, he supported the German Confederation in the Schleswig-Holstein Wars against Denmark, sending thousands of troops and becoming the commander of a German corps. As such, he was instrumental in the 1849 victory at the Battle of Eckernförde against Danish forces. After King Otto of Greece was deposed in 1862, the British government put Ernest's name forward as a possible successor. Negotiations fell through, however, for various reasons, not in the least of which was that he would not give up his beloved duchies in favor of the Greek throne. A supporter of a unified Germany, Ernest watched the various political movements with great interest. While he initially was a great and outspoken proponent of the liberal movement, he surprised many by switching sides and supporting the more conservative Prussians during the Austro-Prussian and Franco-Prussian Wars, and subsequent unification of Germany. His support of the conservatives came at a price, however, and he was no longer viewed as the possible leader of a political movement. According to historian Charlotte Zeepvat, Ernest became increasingly lost in a whirl of private amusements which earned only contempt from outside. Ernest's position was often linked to his brother Prince Albert, husband of Queen Victoria. The two boys were raised as though twins, and became closer upon the separation and divorce of their parents, as well as the eventual death of their mother. The prince's relationship experienced phases of closeness as well as minor arguments as they grew older. After Albert's death in 1861, Ernest became gradually more antagonistic to Victoria and her children, as well as increasingly bitter toward the United Kingdom, publishing anonymous pamphlets against various members of the British royal family. Despite their increasingly differing political views and opinions, however, Ernest accepted his second eldest nephew Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, as his heir presumptive. Upon Ernest's death on the 22nd of August 1893 at Rienhaarsbrunn, Alfred succeeded to the ducal throne. Early life. Ernest, hereditary Prince of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, was born at Ehrenberg Palace in Coburg on the 21st of June 1818. He was the elder son of Ernest III, Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, and his first wife Princess Louise of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg. He was soon joined by a brother, Prince Albert, who would later become the husband of Queen Victoria. Though Duke Ernest fathered numerous children in various affairs, the two boys would have no other legitimate siblings. In 1826, their father succeeded as Ernest I, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, through an exchange of territories after the death of the Duke's uncle, Frederick IV, Duke of Saxe-Gotha-Altenburg. There are various accounts of Ernest's childhood. When he was 14 months old, a servant commented that Ernest runs around like a weasel. He is teething and as cross as a little badger from impatience and liveliness. He is not pretty now, except his beautiful black eyes. In May 1820, his mother described Ernest as very big for his age, as well as intelligent. His big black eyes are full of spirit and vivacity. Biographer Richard Huff writes that, even from their infancy, it was plainly evident that the elder son took after his father, in character and appearance, while Albert strongly resembled his mother in most respects. Ernest and his brother often lived with their grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, until her death in 1831. He and Albert were brought up and educated together as if they were twins. Though Albert was 14 months younger, he surpassed Ernest intellectually. According to their tutor, they went hand in hand in all things, whether at work or at play, engaging in the same pursuits, sharing the same joys and the same sorrows. They were bound to each other by no common feelings of mutual love. Perhaps the sorrows aforementioned related to their parents' marriage. It was not a happy one, and Duke Ernest I was continually unfaithful. In 1824, Ernest I and Louise divorced. She subsequently left Coburg and was disallowed from seeing her sons again. She soon remarried to Alexander von Hanstein, Count of Polzig and Beiersdorf, dying in 1831 at the age of 30. The year after her death, their father married his niece Duchess Marie of Württemberg, who was his sister Antoinette's daughter. Their stepmother was thus also their first cousin. The Duke and his new Duchess were not close, and would produce no children. While the boys formed a happy relationship with their stepmother, Marie had little to no input in her stepsons' lives. The separation and divorce of their parents, as well as the later death of their mother, left the boys scarred and in close companionship with each other. In 1836, Ernest and Albert visited their matrimonially eligible cousin Princess Victoria of Kent, spending a few weeks at Windsor. Both boys, and especially Albert, were considered by his family to be a potential husband for the young princess, and they were both taught to speak competent English. Their father first thought that Ernest would make a better husband to Victoria than Albert, possibly because his sporting interests would be better received by the British public. Most others favoured Albert over Ernest as a possible husband, however. Temperamentally, Victoria was much more like Ernest, as both were lively and sociable with a love for dancing, gossip, and late nights. Conversely, this fast pace made Albert physically ill. Victoria believed Ernest today, most kind, honest, and intelligent expression in his countenance, while Albert seemed full of goodness and sweetness, and very clever and intelligent. No offer of marriage was forthcoming for either brother, however, and they returned home. Ernest entered military training later that year. In April 1837, Ernest and Albert and their household moved to the University of Bonn. 6 weeks into their academic term, Victoria succeeded as Queen of the United Kingdom. As rumors of an impending marriage between her and Albert interfered with their studies, the two brothers left on the 28th of August 1837 at the close of the term to travel around Europe. They returned to Bonn in early November to continue their studies. In 1839, the brothers travelled to England again, where Victoria found her cousin Albert agreeable and soon proposed. This connection would have many implications upon Ernest in the future. For instance, he was selected as godfather for Albert's second daughter, Princess Alice, and would eventually come to give her away at her wedding, only months after Albert's death. Marriage. Various candidates were put forward as a possible wife for Ernest. His own father wanted him to look high up for a wife, such as a Russian Grand Duchess. One possibility was Princess Clementine of Orléans, a daughter of Louis Philippe I, whom he met while visiting the court of the Tuileries. Such a marriage would have required his conversion from Lutheranism to Roman Catholicism, however, and consequently nothing came of it. She later married his cousin Prince August of Saxe-Coburg and GOTHA. Ernest was also considered by Dowager Queen Maria Cristina as a possible husband for her young daughter Isabella II of Spain, and by Queen Victoria for her cousin Princess Augusta of Cambridge. In Karlsruhe on 3 May 1842, Ernest married 21-year-old Princess Alexandrine of Baden. She was the eldest daughter of Leopold, Grand Duke of Baden, and Princess Sophie of Sweden, daughter of the deposed King Gustav IV Adolf of Sweden. Though he gave his consent, his father was disappointed that his first son did not do more to advance the concerns of Coburg. The marriage did not produce any issue, though Ernest apparently fathered at least 3 illegitimate children in later years. Ernest had suffered from a venereal disease in his late teens and early 20s, most likely as the consequence of living a wild, promiscuous lifestyle. These qualities he had inherited under the tutelage of his father, who took his sons to sample the pleasures of Paris and Berlin, to Albert's horror and shame. Ernest had been so visibly deteriorating in appearance as a result that Sarah Littleton, a lady-in-waiting of Queen Victoria, observed at Windsor in 1839 that he was very thin and hollow-cheeked and pale, and no likeness to his brother, nor much beauty. But he has fine dark eyes and black hair, and light figure, and a great look of spirit and eagerness. Later that year, Albert counselled his brother against finding a wife until his condition was fully recovered. He further warned that continued promiscuity could leave Ernest incapable of fathering children. Some historians believe that while he himself was able to father other children, the disease rendered his young wife infertile. As the years went by with further childlessness, Ernest became more distant to his wife, and was continually unfaithful. Though Alexandrine continued to be devoted, choosing to ignore those relationships she was aware of, her loyalty became increasingly baffling to those outside her immediate family. By 1859, after 17 years of childlessness, Ernest took no further interest in his wife. Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. On the 29th of January 1844, Ernest's father died in Gotha, one of the territories their family had recently acquired. Ernest consequently succeeded to the duchies of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha as Ernest II. Development of a constitution. Extravagant to a great degree, Ernest had many money troubles throughout his reign. In January 1848, Ernest visited his brother in the midst of political unrest in Germany. Upon his return, he also discovered unrest in Coburg. One of the many concerns related to finances. Although Ernest had a large inheritance, he also had frequent debts. There were increasing calls to nationalize most of his property. Indeed, Albert had to intervene at one point, and spare his brother the embarrassment of losing one of his Coburg properties. During the 1848 turmoil in Germany, Albert had been constructing his own liberal reform plan, under which a single monarch, chancellor, and parliament would unite the German states. In addition, each state would retain its own current ruling dynasty. As this plan pertained to his brother, Ernest was given a copy in the hope that he would develop his own liberal constitution. Ernest subsequently made a few concessions, but his position remained sound, not counting the increasing problem of his debts. A constitution was drafted and promulgated in 1849 in Gotha, though one had existed in Coburg since 1821. In 1852, both constitutions were converged into one, which converted the personal union of the two duchies into the real union. The duchies were now inseparable, with a common set of institutions. During the political turmoil, timely concessions and Ernest's popular habit of mingling with the people in their pleasures were instrumental in keeping him from losing his throne. Furthermore, various contemporary sources state that Ernest was an able, just, and very popular ruler, which may have also helped keep him in power. Schleswig-Holstein Wars. From 1848 to 1864, Denmark and the German Confederation fought over control of the two duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. Historically, the duchies had been ruled by Denmark since medieval times, but there remained a large German majority. This majority was sparked to rebellion after Frederick VII of Denmark announced on the 27th of March 1848 the duchies would become an integral part of Denmark under his new liberal constitution. Prussia soon became involved, supporting the uprising and beginning the First Schleswig War. Ernest sent 8,000 men initially, adding to the army sent by the German Confederation. He also desired to be given a military job during the war, but was refused, as it was extremely difficult to offer me a position in the army of Schleswig-Holstein corresponding to my rank, according to his memoirs. He agreed to a smaller command, coming to lead a Thuringian contingent. He commented in a letter to his brother that, "I should have declined any other command of the kind, but I could not refuse this one, as, in the present condition of our states, it is important to keep the executive power in our hands." As commander of a German corps, Ernest was instrumental in winning the 5th of April 1849 Battle of Eckernförde against Danish forces. The First War ended in 1851, but would resume in 1864. During this interlude, Ernest fervently opposed the marriage of his nephew Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, to Princess Alexandrine of Denmark, a daughter of the future Christian IX of Denmark. He believed that such a match flew in the face of German interests. Albert replied angrily, "What has that got to do with you? Vicky has racked her brains to help us to find someone, but in vain. We have no other reasonable choice." Albert agreed there were going to be problems with the match, but as he could find no alternative bride, he wrote to Ernest that keeping the affair a private matter was the only way to prevent a break with Prussia and the only way to keep the game in our own hands, impose the conditions that we think necessary, and as far as we can, take off its political edge. Albert also warned his son of Ernest's endeavors to interfere with the match, commenting, "Your uncle will try his hand at this work. Your best defense will be not to enter on the subject, should he broach it." Soon after writing these letters, Prince Albert died on the 14th of December 1861. His death helped Ernest repair his relationship with his sister-in-law, as Victoria had been becoming increasingly angrier over Ernest's objections to the Danish match. The two brothers had always been close, whatever their disagreements, and Albert's death left Ernest wretched, noted Victoria in a letter to her eldest daughter. The death did not solve their argument, however. Seeing that his direct involvement had failed to persuade Victoria, Ernest tried a new tactic. He began to spread gossip about Alexandra and her family, in which her mother, Princess Louise, had had illegitimate children, and Alexandra had had flirtations with young officers. He also wrote to Louise herself, warning that Bertie would be an unfortunate choice for a husband. Additionally, Ernest met with his nephew at Thebes, most likely attempting to discourage him from the match in person. In an 11th of April letter, Victoria unhappily noted to her eldest daughter, "You did not tell me that Bertie had met Uncle Ernest at Thebes. I am always alarmed when I think of Uncle Ernest and Bertie being together, as I know the former will do all he can to set Bertie against the marriage with Princess Alex." Despite Ernest's disapproval, Bertie was duly married to Alexandra on the 10th of March 1863. During the American Civil War, the Duke assigned Ernst Raven to the position of consul in the state of Texas. Raven applied to the Confederate government for a diplomatic exequatur on the 30th of July 1861 and was accepted. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?